This video is going to be a review of the 2016 Giant TCX Advanced Pro 1 cyclocross bike. This will be a first look because I just got the bike, and as I do in a lot of my reviews, I'll do a first look and then do a couple reviews after that the more I get time on the bike. So if you've seen my other videos, I did some reviews on Shimano Di2 I had a 9er cyclocross bike with Di2. I had some issues with Di2 and I liked it, but it was a little, because the battery went out, I thought it might be unreliable in the event of races and things like that. So just to kind of let you know how I got on this bike is I sold my 9er. It was a full Shimano Ultegra Di2 with the intention of going with mechanical shifting and hydraulic brakes. When I went to order the new 9er, they were out of stock. 9er's actually redesigning the BSB9 RDO, and it was going to be a few weeks, but it wasn't guaranteed, and my cyclocross season is coming up. So I checked with my local bike shop and found out that Giant actually had the 2016s, a few of them ready to go, and so I jumped on it. Now, ironically, this also has Di2, but I got such a great deal on this bike, and I have a partial sponsorship, so I don't pay full retail, and I got such a good deal in this. I said I'm going to give Ultegra Di2 one more shot. Hopefully I won't have any issues with the battery failing on this bike. So that's how I got back on a Di2 bike after selling my other one. I had no issues at all with the 9er frame and fork. It's a phenomenal bike, phenomenal chassis. If you've seen a lot of my other videos, I'm a pretty big fan of Giant. Not because I'm sponsored by Giant or anything. I just think they have really good values on their bikes. They don't use any crazy proprietary components, and you can get a pretty good deal, pretty good value for the components and everything. And so let me kind of go over this bike and kind of give you my thoughts on it. And I've got one ride in. I did a ride this morning, a 75-mile dirt road ride on this bike with a group, and so I kind of give you my initial thoughts, but it won't be a full review by any means until I get some good riding time on this. So this is a carbon frame and fork, and that's what's meant by advanced in the name. And I think Giant did a pretty good job with their color schemes. Sometimes the color schemes of Giant are a little off to me. This one I think looks really good matching with the fork and the frame. It's got a, I'm just going to go from the top down here, it's got a Physique Antares, I guess that's how you would say it, saddle. Not the most comfortable saddle in the world for me. I had one on another Giant cyclocross bike and it was a little uncomfortable. I actually switched to my favorite, which is a WTB Silverado. But you know, I did 75 miles on it this morning and it was okay, so I'm gonna keep it on there. I don't think I'm gonna take it off. I think I just need to get used to a different type of saddle. I mentioned that Giant doesn't use crazy proprietary components on this bike, or on their bikes really at all. They do use their own cockpit, so their own stem, their own handlebars, and their own seat post. And this seat post is actually kind of a wedge. It's the first bike I've used with it. So you've got just kind of a little wedge in there that you, when you kind of tighten the bolt, it just puts some pressure on it. So you know, I kind of prefer a collar, but we'll see how that goes. I didn't have any slippage or anything today. It was just kind of a little hard to put the seat post in there. I had to actually kind of just knock it down real good to get the seat post in there. Actually it was the wedge. The wedge I had to knock down in there with a little soft mallet to get it down inside the bike. So that was a little, you know, disconcerting to tap something down into a carbon frame, but it wasn't a lot of pressure. I'll say right off, my first hesitation, my only hesitation with this bike when I was looking at getting it was the rotor cranks. I'm not real familiar with those, and the wheel set. Normally I use Stan's wheels when I go tubeless. This is the first wheel set that I've used and set up tubeless with the exception of way back in the day when tubeless came out and everybody used the rubber rim strips. But since then I've been using Stan's wheels just because I love the way the tires lock into the bead. So let me talk about the wheel set for a minute. This bike actually comes with some yellow tape, and you know, and it also comes with the valve stems. So it's set up ready to go tubeless. Now when I took the stock tires off and went to put on the yellow tape, I noticed there was already a rim strip that said tubeless ready. This is actually a DT Swiss wheel set made for Giant, and so it had a DT Swiss rim tape already in it. It said tubeless ready. So I had my local bike shop check with Giant, and sure enough, I didn't need to use the yellow tape. So I just basically put the valve stem in, put this tire on, and put the sealant in. Now it sealed up pretty good. It took about a minute or two of shaking the tire around to get the edges there was just some air coming out around the edges, but it actually sealed up, and I actually had to put some pressure, maybe 35-40 psi, to push the beads of the tire out on the rim, and it finally seated up. It kind of leaked the night that first night, and the tire's a little flat, but as with any standard tire, you usually have to slosh the Stan's fluid in there for a good ride or two to get it to fully seal up, which I think is just the issue. So I did do 75 miles on the bike this morning, and the tire pressures held fine. This afternoon I noticed the front tire is getting just a little soft, but again, I think I just need to put in a few rides and let the Stan's fluid fully seal the tires. So far so good. You know, like I said, it was a little bit of a hesitation using these as tubeless, but this is not the stock tire that came on it. It came with a more mud tire. Since I'm in my season of riding dirt roads, my cross season doesn't start for another couple months. I don't want to just grind down a good set of knobs on dirt roads, so I use these more semi-slicks. These are the Clement LAS. These are my favorite dirt road tires. It's a 33 by 700C tire. It actually measures out a little bit wider. I think it measures out to about a 35. Again, I wanted to use these just for riding dirt roads. So I think that the wheel set's going to be fine, you know, I did have the thought of getting a Stan's wheel set for racing to run tubeless, but so far so good on this. So when I do my reviews, I'll let you guys know how this wheel set is holding up. The other question I had about this bike was this rotor crank set. So as you can see, this is a 1x11 drivetrain. I've never run a 1x on a cross bike, and I've never really used a rotor crank set. And so it's kind of, I actually pulled the crank arm off just because I wanted to see how it worked, and I also wanted to put on my homemade chainstay protector here. But actually, if you've never used these, you take off this outer bolt, then you take off this inner kind of cap with a Shimano lock ring tool, put the bolt back in, put the cap on the outside, and then you can crank the bolt off and get the crank arm off. So a little bit different, not quite as quick as Shimano. I honestly prefer Shimano as far as how easy it is to get those crank arms off, but you know, it's not like I'm going to be pulling these off all the time. Now, this, as far as I can tell, is a narrow wide chain ring, which is really cool. And it's also uses a chain guide. So with a narrow wide and a chain guide, it's pretty much guaranteed that you are not going to drop a chain on this bike. This is a 40-tooth front chain ring. Now this is obviously a pure cyclocross race bike with a front chain ring with only you know, with a 1x. If you're going to use this bike for gravel grinders in the mountains, you're probably going to need a wider gear range. So you're probably going to need a 2 chain ring setup in the front. But for what I do on this bike, this is perfect. And I today did not run out of gear, even did a sprint for a county road sign with the group, and did not spin out the bike. So where I think I can get up to about 27 miles an hour before I start to go above my normal cadence. So unless you're just trying to chase down someone on a downhill, you know, like up in the mountains, I think it's going to have a tall enough gear. It's also, unless you're grinding up something that's 2 miles an hour, you should have plenty of gear in the back. So again, for pure cyclocross racing and for dirt road riding, the gear setup is fine. What I love about it is the simplicity, and you also save some weight by not having a front derailleur. Now it does have, for the Di2, it does actually have the cable coming out of the front shifter going into the junction box. So if you wanted to add a front derailleur and a 2x setup, you could. You would just hook up the front derailleur to the junction box inside, and you're good to go. So you could switch it obviously pretty easily to a 2x setup in the front. And speaking of simplicity, one thing that had me go back to Di2 is just how simple they are if they're working, if the battery's working correctly. It's pretty much a no maintenance system. It shifts great every time. You can ride through mud and crud, and it just keeps shifting. There's no cables that you got to lube and worry about stuff getting inside your cables. I talked to a guy today who did a mud race, a gravel grinder, and he'd got junk in the cables and his shifting went down. So that's honestly what convinced me to go back and try Di2 one more time. With the money that I saved on this bike, I'm actually going to get another battery to keep in my toolbox for cross season. And so that way, God forbid the battery go out again, I would have a spare ready to go. So it is hydraulic brakes, which I love on a cyclocross bike. I will never ever in my life go back to cantilever brakes on a cross bike because I actually enjoy stopping when I pull the brakes. So these work great, and they come with a 140 rotor. Now my previous bike, the 9er BSB9 4-star build, came with 160 millimeter rotors. When you're on a mud course in cyclocross, that's a lot of braking power. So I honestly like having a smaller rotor. I still get plenty of stopping power with this bike. Again, I only got one ride, but no issues at all. So if you're on a wet course or a mud course, 140s are great because you can lock up a 160 pretty easily if you're not careful. So just a few more close-ups on the bike. The fork is plenty stiff. It's just your standard hydraulic Di2 lever. Again, 11-speed, it shifts very well. And let me show you the axles. And what's really cool about this bike is it's got a 15 millimeter axle in the front, but it also has a 142 by 12 in the back, which I'm really stoked about. My 9er did not have that. Now I said that 9er's redesigning that BSB9, so I will put my money on the fact that they are going to change the new BSB9s to run a 142 by 12. The rear axle's pretty standard. The front is a little funky. Let me show it to you. So it's got this quick release, and then you just kind of unthread this, and then you pull out the axle. And I've got this leaning up against a house, so it might be kind of hard to get it out. So it's got a carbon axle, which is nice. This is a really light axle, and then it's got this these threads on the end. So it's different than a RockShox Maxle or a Fox axle that I've used in the past on my bikes. But it works, and what creates the stiffness isn't the threads, it's more of the socket that the axle goes into. But it does slip in and out easier than a Fox that I've used in the past. The Fox, I've had to kind of shake the axle around, move the wheel around. This goes in and out real quick. So it's just different, but it is light, and it works pretty well. In terms of sizing, I went with the medium, and this is actually a 53. It's actually, I think it's 52.5 is what Giant says on their website for the geometry. I'm a little under 5'9", and the medium Giants fit me very well, and this bike is no exception. So that will wrap up my first look at the Giant TCX Advanced Pro 1 cyclocross bike. Again, this is the 2016 model. This just came out. Interestingly, I think that they're only going to offer Ultegra with Di2. The model below this, the the two model is a 105 mechanical with hydraulic brakes, so mechanical shifting and hydraulic brakes. So again, that tells me that it's going to only be offered if you want Ultegra in Di2. Now let me say one last thought is I'm really impressed with the value that you get with this. If you've looked at the 2015 models, they make one that's a Dura-Ace Di2 that's very similar to this. The only real difference is the wheel set and the fact that it is Dura-Ace instead of Ultegra. That bike is about $7,200. This one, I don't know the retail price of this because it's not even up on Giant's website, but judging by the price that I typically pay with my partial sponsorship through my shop, I'm guessing this bike is going to be priced at around $4,500, and I don't think it's going to be more than $5,000. So that is well over $2,000 less than you can get the 2015 Dura-Ace model. So again, bike is priced very well. I think this is going to be a popular bike. So stay tuned to my channel, and I'll follow up this review with a month or so of riding, and then do another review when I'm in the middle of my cyclocross season. Thanks for watching.